So today we're going to continue our discussion of low-cost weapons for the SHTF, World War III, and economic collapse. And what we're going to do is talk about H&R and NEF single-shot shotguns. We'll also talk about the rifle variations of these guns. Now, what we're going to find is this is a prolific firearm. The H&R single-shot shotguns were produced for over 100 years. When H&R went under, some investors bought some of the weapons and production facility of H&R and they renamed it New England Firearms Company, or NEF. And the gun continued in production. To my knowledge, it's been out of production for quite a few years now, but there are millions of these floating around. In front of us, we have some that were confiscated, some modified from the street, and then some variations. So when we're talking about single barrel shotguns and these H&R single barrel rifles, this fits two categories of usage in SHTF in current times. One is as a utility weapon for hunting, pest control, so forth. The other is a combat weapon. Now, a single-shot shotgun or a single-shot rifle sits right over top of a muzzle loader in utility. So when we look at a combat weapon, a single shot will generate more firepower than a muzzle loader by far, but it does not approach a bolt-action rifle or a semi-automatic or pump shotgun or rifle for generation of firepower. That's its main limitation. So it's not ideal for use as combat. Now, it is ideal as a cashe weapon. It is simplified. The H&R series is built as a heavy-duty weapon. You can find them for $50 to $100 used, so you're not going to be really irritated if you lose the weapon. So you can use it as a cashe weapon. You can use it for food procurement. You can use it to arm people in your 510 program that show up with nothing, because a single shot shotgun or rifle is way better than nothing. So if they show up, they get what they get. When we're looking at this, they run the full gamut, and a lot of them you find are heavily modified. That may not be an issue for you, or it may be an issue for you. That's your decision to make. But one of the main modifications I've seen in a lot of these on the used gun market is they're shortened at between 18 and 20 inches in length. And for instance, this first H&R, this was heavily modified. This came from a law enforcement distributor as a trade-in weapon. And you can see here what they did is they modified this to look like a Thompson submachine gun. So this might have been a curiosity that was discussed and shown at the coffee table, or this might have been an actual street weapon that somebody used to try to intimidate people. We just don't know the history of it. Now, this next gun is a very early H&R. It is so early that it has the old style takedown. So this comes off and it uses a spring-loaded plunger. This is ideal as a cashe weapon because you don't need any tools to take it apart like a modern H&R. Now, the downside of this is an older gun. It has a 2 3/4 chamber or shorter. These old guns will just say 12 gauge on them, or 20 gauge, or 410, and it won't tell you what the shell length is, so you actually have to use a headspace gauge to determine what this gun shoots. This particular gun shoots 2 3/4 shells. I really like the configuration of this gun and the size and the fact that it just takes down. Now, the negative side of this is these real early guns do not have a hammer block safety. So when we look at H&Rs, we can break them down into three main groups regardless of what model number they have on them. The first group is these early guns that do not have a hammer block safety, and they take shells shorter than 3 inches. Now, what's interesting here is this is a modern stock, and whoever had this gun put this Jack Daniels aluminum plate on here from a bottle of Jack Daniels. So in the shop we always call this the Jack Daniels commemorative special. But I really like the configuration of this gun, and at some point it had a modern H&R stock put on it. So what you find is most H&Rs take the same stocks. Now that's not a hard and fast rule. Once you get back before World War II, you'll have different models of stocks. But a lot of these from the late 40s up until the end of production will take the same stocks. Now this is another gun that came in that we got, and this is actually a 10 gauge model. This thing is huge. H&R actually put a big metal weight, a heavy rod in the buttstock to tame the recoil. This is an interesting gun. It's very compact. It's 10 gauge. It's got an 18.5 inch barrel. It shoots 2 ounces a shot. Now that is a really good gun for certain activities, hunting big game or for ambush duty. Now the interesting thing is H&R and NEF made a run of 3.5 inch mag guns in 12 gauge, but they built them on the normal small frame. So those guns, the few that were made, the recoil was horrendous when you shot 3.5 inch shells in it, because they would fire the same 2 ounces a shot as the 10 gauge. But this gun weighed 3 or 4 pounds more than the 12 gauge version, so the recoil was actually less on the 10 than it was on the 3.5 inch 12. Now this is an interesting gun that came in, and this one somebody did a homemade miniature stock here. So this is a 30-30. It has full length wood in the front, it has the straight stock on the back, and it's very accurate. So you can have a lightweight takedown gun in 30-30, which is the most common. Then they had 22 Hornet, and they had some in other calibers late in production. Now what I want to point out is with these H&Rs, this is a normal length H&R. So you can see how much these guns were shortened to make them handier. The other thing is with the shorter barrel, they fit into cashe tubes, they fit into aircraft, and a lot of pilots use them as a survival gun. Now you will find a lot of guns rusted up like this in SHTF. This is one I haven't disassembled and cleaned up yet. And these cost little to nothing on the used gun market if they're rusted up. And a lot of times you can buy those and clean them up, and you can maintain the barrel length if you like that length of barrel, or you can shorten it to an 18 or 20 inch barrel. Now this is a really old single barrel shotgun. It's a Western field made probably for Montgomery Wards. And with really old single barrel guns, what you're going to find is they may not have any caliber marking at all. So you will have to measure the chambers and use headspace gauges on this really old stuff. They also will not have a hammer block safety. So when we get back to talking about H&R as a long production life, we started with this early model that has the pull-off front end on it. It has no hammer block safety. Then we went to this type of frame. In the early production did not have a hammer block safety either. Later in production they added the hammer block safety like this gun has. So you can look in here and you can see the bar rising and falling. That's a very important consideration if the gun's going to be handled roughly or you're going to hunt in a tree stand. Because if you drop one of these guns that doesn't have a hammer block safety, if the sear notches strip off, the gun can fire. Now the final thing I want to discuss about H&Rs is the fact that they had survival gun series and backpacking gun series that they made for the public. And you could get some of those in cases like this one. This particular gun was a gun for large and small game. You could use this as a backpacking weapon. Some of them had chrome plating. This particular model gave you a 30-30 rifle barrel in a 20 gauge shotgun barrel. So the interesting thing is, in a lot of parts of the world you have large game. Many parts of the world you only have small game. So when you look at this H&R, you had a nice chrome plated 30-30 barrel and then a 20 gauge barrel. And for some reason they put these straight stocks on. I don't know if that's so that they took up less space. These were pretty popular in a lot of aircraft in Alaska and Canada, where they would fly with these with a few boxes of ammo in case they went down or they couldn't get out of one of the lakes they landed at. And these were really popular, but they were very expensive, and unfortunately today they are extremely expensive. Now the interesting thing is, in this pack there's actually a pouch for a screwdriver. And when we talked about the really old H&Rs that had the snap-off fore-end, the vast majority of them produced from the 40s on have a screw here. So the downside of this as a survival weapon is you had to have a screw. But what I noticed is, in these survivor models, in these combination models, the screw here, you could use a quarter on it or something like that to turn it. Now, I really like these. They're very accurate, they're handy. Now the downside of this is, would you really want two guns? Because the extra receiver and weight would not really be a big addition to this kit. So in my opinion, I would prefer to have a 20-inch shotgun and a 20-inch 30-30. But if weight is a consideration or you have to backpack it in, this is a good alternative. One thing I'll say is the 20 gauge barrel gives you buckshot and rifle slug capacity that you can use for big game. It also provides small game capacity with birdshot, whereas the 30-30 barrel is pretty dedicated to large game only. Now, another way to look at this is, if they had provided a 410 barrel instead of a 20-20, that might make more sense in some ways, because you could carry a lot more 410 ammo for small game. Now, when we look at this Rossi version, this one was set up for small game only. And this is actually built on a very small frame, so it's actually not big enough for their 20 gauge or 12 gauge. And in here what they did, and one thing I liked, is they actually made the 22 rimfire barrel 16.5 inches, where they made the shotgun barrel 18.5. And with this gun, the takedown feature is a screw that's on the front sling swivel. So you don't actually need a tool to take this apart. Now I find these take a little moving around to get them lined up so that you can tighten it up, but you need no tools for this. And you can see how small the Rossi is compared to the H&R gun. So when we're looking at this, you can see how much smaller and lighter this is. So one interesting thing I would say is that one thing that I would suggest is, if you're in an area where you only have small game, this would be a good choice. Now, if you had to use it for anti-personnel use, you could always use 410 rifle slugs in here. Even though this is a smoothbore barrel, the slug will give you good accuracy. And then you can carry a whole lot of 22 rimfire ammo and 410 ammo if you're in the field for an extended period of time. Now, on this gun, I think if you bought the version that was in 22 Hornet in 410, it would give you the same kind of capacity. But I found it interesting if you look here at the difference in size between these two guns. So, just a few suggestions and thoughts on some low budget additions you can make to your survival battery. You can use a lot of these old H&Rs. So as a suggestion, you can use a lot of used old H&Rs as a survival weapon. So my suggestion would be you could buy used H&R single shot shotguns, whether they were 20 gauge or 12 gauge. You can use them as a combination weapon for self-defense and food procurement. These would serve in a cache location. You could use these in your 510 program to equip people that show up with nothing. And if you want a aircraft survival system or a boat survival system or backpacking weapon, these combination guns would work really good where you have a rifle and a shotgun barrel. So just a little bit of thoughts and ramblings on H&Rs. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next video.